Privileged accounts are the most dangerous accounts in any IT environment. An administrator with unrestricted access can bypass every other security control your organization has implemented. Control A.8.2 of ISO 27001, 2022 addresses privileged access rights, the policies and technical measures that constrain who holds elevated permissions, how those permissions are used, and how that usage is monitored. In the next few minutes, we will explore what privileged access management requires and why it is essential to information security. Let us begin by defining what privileged accounts are, what types exist across typical IT environments, and why they represent such a significant security risk. Privileged accounts exist across every layer of the IT stack: operating systems, databases, applications, and network infrastructure, and each one represents a high-value target for attackers. Privileged accounts span every tier of the IT environment. Local administrator accounts on individual workstations, domain administrator accounts that control Active Directory, root accounts on Linux servers, service accounts that run automated processes, and application administrator accounts that manage business-critical systems. All of these carry elevated permissions that can bypass the controls protecting ordinary user data. A.8.2 applies to all of them, requiring a consistent privileged access management approach regardless of account type or platform. What makes privileged accounts genuinely dangerous is the scope of what they can do. A domain administrator can access any file on any system in the domain, modify group policy to disable security controls, create new accounts, and, critically, alter or delete audit logs that would reveal what they had done. This capacity to bypass and cover tracks means that a compromised privileged account represents a near-total security failure, which is why the standard requires significantly more stringent controls around these accounts than around standard user access. Security incident investigation data consistently shows that the vast majority of serious breaches, data exfiltration, ransomware deployment, financial fraud, involve the compromise or misuse of a privileged account at some stage of the attack chain. Attackers who gain initial access through phishing or vulnerability exploitation almost always seek to escalate to privileged access as quickly as possible, because it is privileged access that allows them to move laterally, disable defenses, and achieve their ultimate objectives. The insider threat dimension of privileged access is equally significant. A disgruntled employee with administrator rights can cause enormous damage, deleting databases, exfiltrating customer records, or introducing backdoors, with a level of efficiency and stealth that external attackers cannot match. Control A.8.2 requires organizations to apply the principle of least privilege rigorously to administrative accounts, ensuring that no one holds more privileged access than their role requires, and that all privileged activity is subject to monitoring and review. 4 essential concepts that define a robust privileged access management program aligned with Control A.8.2. Just-in-time access represents the most rigorous implementation of the principle of least privilege for administrative accounts. Rather than allowing administrators to hold standing privileged access that is available at any time, just-in-time systems grant elevated permissions only when a specific, approved task requires them, and automatically revoke that access when the task is complete or the time window expires. This dramatically reduces the window of opportunity for attackers who compromise an administrator's credentials, because the compromise only yields elevated access if it occurs during an active privilege session. Privilege elevation with logging is the operational mechanism that allows organizations to grant temporary administrative access in a controlled and auditable way. When a system administrator needs to perform a privileged task, they request elevation through a PAM system, which may require approval, generates a detailed audit log of the session, and enforces time limits on the elevated access. Every command executed during the elevated session is recorded, creating an immutable audit trail that supports both security monitoring and incident investigation. Issuing separate admin accounts is a foundational PAM control that limits the damage of credential compromise. When an administrator uses the same account for both daily tasks, email, browsing, document editing, and administrative duties, a phishing email or malicious download that compromises their standard account immediately yields the attacker privileged access. Separate admin accounts ensure that the compromise of a standard account does not automatically grant elevated privileges, forcing attackers to perform additional steps that generate additional detection opportunities. A privileged access workstation is the physical or virtual security boundary that separates administrative activity from the normal threat environment. Administrators access sensitive systems from a PAW rather than their general-purpose workstation, which means the admin session is not exposed to the phishing emails, malicious websites, and untrusted software that the standard workstation encounters. PAWs are hardened. Minimal software, no general internet access, strict application controls, creating an isolated environment where privileged operations can be performed with significantly reduced risk of compromise. Let us now examine the practical controls and governance practices that organizations put in place to manage privileged access rights in compliance with A.8.2. Managing privileged access effectively requires a combination of technical controls, operational procedures, and regular governance reviews that together constrain the risk that elevated accounts represent. Separate admin accounts and the prohibition on shared credentials are the entry-level requirements for privileged access management. Every administrator should have a uniquely identified admin account so that privileged activity is attributable to a specific individual and can be correlated with their normal working patterns. Shared admin passwords, where multiple people know the same administrator credential, make accountability impossible and turn a single credential compromise into an organization-wide breach. PAM vaults that manage and rotate privileged credentials without exposing them to users directly are the operational solution that satisfies this requirement at scale. Implementing just-in-time access or time-limited elevation means that no administrator maintains standing privileged access as a persistent state. Elevated permissions are granted through a documented, approved request, active only during the approved time window, and automatically revoked when the window closes. This approach significantly reduces the risk surface. An attacker who compromises an admin credential outside of an approved privilege session gains nothing immediately, and the time-limited nature of all elevated access limits the damage window, even if a session is compromised. Logging and monitoring privileged account activity is how organizations detect the misuse or compromise of elevated accounts. Every privileged login, every administrative command, every configuration change made under a privileged account should be captured in tamper-resistant audit logs and fed into security monitoring processes. Anomaly detection, an admin account logging in at an unusual time, executing unusual commands, or accessing systems outside its normal scope, is one of the most reliable ways to detect both insider misuse and external attackers operating with stolen credentials. Periodic access reviews are the governance discipline that prevents privileged access from accumulating over time as employees change roles and privileged access grants are never revoked. Organizations should review the list of privileged account holders at regular intervals. Quarterly is a common standard, and remove elevated access from anyone whose role no longer requires it. Audit evidence of these reviews demonstrates to auditors that the organization actively governs its privileged access rather than treating it as a one-time provisioning decision. Let us summarize the essential points from our exploration of Control A.8.2. If you want to master all 93 ISO 27001, 2022 Annex A controls and build a compliant, effective ISMS, our complete Udemy course provides the guidance, templates, and practical frameworks you need. Enroll today. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. See you in the next video.